The 20th century's grand finale was fast approaching, and the world was in disarray. Global inequality, financial crises, HIV/AIDS, and cancer epidemics all running rampant. How did the world get here, and did the UN have a solution? In 1983, the UN created the Brundtland Commission as a response to the global outcry on environmental, economic, and social challenges. This commission produced the iconic report Our Common Future, where they popularized the term sustainable development. The UN then further elaborated Brundtland's report in an action plan called Agenda 21. It was presented at the UN's first Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Agenda 21 was a non-binding action plan for countries to execute sustainable development at a local, national, and international level. Despite Agenda 21's good reception, it failed. Large organizations did not embrace sustainable development, and many developing countries thought they were predominantly drafted and represented by policymakers from rich developed countries. Adding on to this, global problems were starting to pile up. All of this led to mistrust towards the UN because of how they handled the economic situation in the 80s and 90s. Despite the UN's mixed track record in the 20th century, its core premise of one country, one vote still gave them enough legitimacy to continue to reframe global debates. Finally, the year 2000 had arrived, a momentous calendar event. What better time than this, thought the UN, to revise the terms of global cooperation? The UN used this renewed spirit to make a global promise to reduce poverty and human deprivation at historically unprecedented rates, using different nations' collaborative action. The world would come to know this global commitment as the Millennium Development Goals. 191 United Nations member states and 22 international organizations came together on the 8th of September 2000 in New York, pledging to achieve the 8 MDGs by 2015. The MDGs received a mixed reception. People either viewed them as an optimistic blueprint for global equality or believed that they did not have any meaningful targets, policies, and actions. The MDGs were even seen as a new rationale for rich developed countries to promote the ideology of capitalism and globalization, disguised as aid for developing countries. Despite this mixed reaction, the MDGs had still become the world's central reference point for development cooperation. It packaged global critical issues on poverty, hunger, disease, inequality, and environmental degradation into easily understandable goals, which in turn promoted global awareness. Despite the MDG's achievements, they were wildly criticized. Civil society groups were livid to see no mention of women's reproductive health issues, political conflicts, employment, or economic growth in any of the MDG targets. Even the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights criticized the MDGs for not aligning with global human rights and standards and principles. But the worst was yet to come. The MDG agenda's biggest criticism was how extraordinarily narrow they were. They reflected a top-down process of a North-South aid agenda, sometimes referred to as the minimum development goals. 8 out of 6 MDGs were predominantly relevant to developing countries. This meant the UN and rich developed countries only needed to invest in developing countries and did not have to change the status quo in their own nations. This resulted in the MDGs not being connected to the world's development priorities. As 2015 was approaching, it was clear that the MDGs desperately needed a successor that were going to overcome the challenges that plagued them. Here's a quick recap. The UN created the Brundtland Commission as a response to global outcry on environmental, economic, and social challenges. The UN published a non-binding action plan in 1992 called Agenda 21. The failure of Agenda 21 and the rise of global issues in the mid to late 90s left the UN in a precarious situation. At the dawn of the 21st century, the UN unveiled the Millennium Development Goals. Despite the MDGs making progress on each of its 8 goals and 18 targets, they have been wildly criticized. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our video. If you did, leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let us know in the comments what you'd like us to cover next. If you'd like to learn more about sustainability, assess your skills, and interact with like-minded people, come join our SDG Plus community.